All right, so I thought I'd do another video about the 4 quadrants of motion, or 4 quadrants of movement. What I typically find with my clients that have some imbalances is that they're usually missing at least 1, if not 2. Sometimes they're even missing 3 of these 4 quadrants in their traditional workouts. So I drew this, and it's also on my website as well. But this is basically the little 4 quadrant model. So I'll try to explain it just a little bit as I kind of point and talk about it. But kind of up here in this upper left quadrant is unloaded 3-dimensional movements, okay? And then down here in the bottom right, these are linear unloaded movement patterns, okay? And then over here on this bottom kind of right quadrant are linear loaded movement patterns. And up here on this kind of top right position, these are 3-dimensional loaded movement patterns, okay? So we kind of take a look at the list that's through here. Most people, when I ask them, all right, what do you do for your normal workouts? And they say something like, oh, if they're working out, pretty, good in a normal kind of traditional way, they say, oh yeah, I'm lifting weights, so like I'm doing some squats or some bicep curls and stuff like that. And, maybe I'm doing a little bit of cardio. So I look at that and I say, oh, that's pretty good. But in that position right now, traditional weightlifting is down here. And up here is kind of like your cardio, your jogging. So they're kind of here to here in this kind of, left kind of upper and right lower 2 quadrants. And that's if you're doing a pretty good job, right? You're actually getting in some, lifting, and, you're getting in some of the cardio benefits, whether it's walking or jogging. So those are great. However, where I find some of the spots and I say, do you do any 3-dimensional loaded movement patterns? And they're like, oh, well, what is that? And so I'll talk a little bit about each one of these categories. But this is like where the tool Viper really comes in handy. And I'll show you a few of these, but that's what this kind of cylindrical tube is that's right back here. And there's some other functional movements that you can do, okay? So Viper's not the only tool that you can use to give yourself loaded movement patterns. Another great example of that would be, doing farm chores, okay? So like when I was a kid and I was picking up a hay bale and had to kind of lift it, twist, turn, and then throw it up onto the hay rack or up into the hay loft, that was a 3-dimensional movement pattern that was loaded, meaning there was external weight added to it. So again, I'll kind of go through each one of these quadrants, but just try to visualize this just for a minute, right? There's one plane right up here. There's 3-dimensional on one end of the spectrum, and then there's linear, right? Linear just means in one direction. 3-dimensional means you're moving in multiple different directions, all right? And then over here, there is unloaded, meaning you don't have any external weights added to it, okay? And then over here is loaded. So opposite end of the spectrum here, you have unloaded and loaded. Loaded means with weights or with an external load of some sort. Okay, so try to remember this. I'll try to kind of keep it nearby as kind of describe a few of these other movement patterns and exercises. But that's kind of our little list of, 4 different dimensions of movement. So we'll just kind of go through that whole list again. So what are, basically 3-dimensional unloaded movements? That's things like jogging, okay? Because as you are walking, you're actually stepping forward. As I step forward with my left foot, my right arm slightly moves forward. Okay, the same thing if I'm running. Like as I take a running step forward, my right elbow kind of goes towards my left knee, and my left elbow goes back and behind me. So as I'm running, I'm doing this kind of slow motion, but I'm actually getting a rotational effect in my body, meaning that I'm starting to swing my upper body a little bit like this as my legs are coming up and moving like that. Okay, so right there, that is a 3-dimensional unloaded movement that we're going through, okay? Another one on there would be sprints. It's just that in fast motion, right? So you're just kind of running like this. But personally, whenever I do sprints, oh my gosh, I feel muscle fatigue everywhere. I feel it on my abs. I feel a little bit on my chest and arms from really pumping my arms and really trying to swing fast. I feel it on my legs and stuff too. So anyway, those are just a few of the different muscles and stuff that you can get just in a 3-dimensional unloaded movement pattern. Another great example that a lot of people think about are sports. So One thing is doing a sport like basketball, you are moving randomly in 3 dimensions, right? So let's pretend I had a basketball hoop right here and I was playing and I was just, shooting and getting my own rebounds. If I had the ball and I shot it and the ball went this way, I'm gonna randomly kind of move my body, pick up the rebound and then dribble it back here and then maybe shoot again. And then the ball is going to randomly bounce off of the rim, assuming I don't make it, and I have to go and retrieve that ball, right? I'm moving kind of multiple different directions, trying to retrieve that ball, just playing basketball. So even here down in my basement, I love playing Nerf hoops. We actually have a Nerf hoop right up there that I play with my kids because it's 3-dimensional unloaded movement patterns, okay? Hockey is another good one, right? You get some load, obviously, if you're shoving somebody else off of you. Football would be a great one, tennis. I mean, any of those sports are moving your body in all these random different positions without necessarily any external load on your body, okay? So again, that's this upper left quadrant here is 3-dimensional unloaded movement patterns. So again, cardio, not all cardio is in there. Like if you're on a stationary elliptical machine and you're just moving your legs like this, but you're not getting the arms to twist and rotate, that means that you're not really effectively getting 3 dimensions. You're still kind of in mostly 2-dimensional, okay? Same thing on a bicycle, unless you're mountain biking or unless you're taking some really good turns on a road bike. For the most part, you're sitting here kind of, with your hands on the handlebars and you just get slight turns, okay? Now, if you're mountain biking, you really have to bounce and kind of move around and shift. Yeah, that turns into 3D, but otherwise that is linear if you're staying in just one plane or one direction, okay? So again, 3D means that you're not just moving in one direction. That's 1D, right? Here's 2D where I'm moving like forward and back. But then that 3rd dimension is where I'm actually rotating, turning and twisting just a little bit from side to side, okay? So again, that was 3D unloaded movement patterns, okay? If we go down here, we'll kind of do the 2 most popular. So this other one here is traditional weightlifting, okay? So this is now in the linear, meaning we're moving in one direction, but it's also loaded, okay? So a traditional weight exercise would be like a dumbbell curl, okay? So if I had my 2 dumbbells right here, and if I just move these right up and down, I am moving in the plane of gravity, okay? So right here, I am linear, meaning I'm moving one direction. I'm moving up and down, okay? So as I do this curl, this is a linear loaded movement pattern because I have load. These are these weights, okay? So if I really wanted to turn this easily into a 3-dimensional loaded movement pattern, I could do a bicep curl with a turn or with a turning lunge. So if I went like this and I kind of came back into a karate stance and then I did my curl, that now became a 3-dimensional loaded movement exercise, right? So now I'm moving my body in 3 planes of motion as I'm doing that bicep curl. So that's just a short change from linear loaded to 3-dimensional loaded movement patterns, okay? But typically a linear loaded is like what I have here listed. It's traditional weightlifting, right? If I had my dumbbells here and I was doing a squat up and down, it's a great exercise, but I'm moving in one direction, so it's linear, okay? Same thing, if I was lying on my back, had the dumbbells here, and I was pushing up and down, chest press, that's a linear loaded movement pattern. Okay, so hopefully you kind of get the idea with this. And again, you could fill in the blank, right? I could do those same movement patterns with a TRX. The TRX is basically still using body movement, so it's debatable. There's a little gray area there on how much load that you're getting, but you can actually increase the load by varying your angle with a TRX. Kettlebells, maces, other weighted things, but again, as long as you're moving in one plane, that is a linear loaded movement pattern, okay? So again, those are the first 2 most common quadrants that people are doing their exercises in. Again, they are the 3D unloaded, again, jogging, cardio kind of fits in there. Sports also fit into that category, right? So things again like football, basketball, tennis, anything like that. And then again, traditional weights, those are the most common. So typically what I see is that people are overloaded in those 2 quadrants, meaning that they're getting this one and they're getting this one. But where do the injuries crop up? It's because they're missing this other side of this, of this chart, okay? They're missing from here to here. So let's take a look at what those are. So if we look at the 3D loaded, That's things like with this Viper that I have back here, okay? So with this, I'm able to do three-dimensional movements. This is kind of like my hay bale example that I was talking about. So when I was a kid, right, if the hay bales were here on the ground, I have to pick them up, use my body, I'd have to pick them up, move, and then like set them or throw them over onto the hay rack, right? Or if I was on the hay rack and we're in the hay, or in the hay loft, I was on the hay rack and I have to pick these up, bring it up to my chest, and then try to like throw it up into the hay loft, right? So those are three-dimensional loaded, because this is weighted, movement patterns, okay? Another example of these exercises would be like a weighted cable golf swing, okay? So if you can imagine, I'm going to use this band and my door here as an example, but this would be as if I had a high cable attached, you know, to a pulley machine or a cable column in the gym. But right here, imagine you had your hands up here like this, and you're doing kind of like a wood chop motion where you're stepping like this and you're rotating your body down and coming across again, okay? So I'm getting resistance that's trying to pull me back this way, but I'm stepping in multiple different planes of motion, okay? So that's another example of just you can manipulate that pulley in the gym and you can go from low to high, right? But you're trying to twist and turn your body with that resistance, okay? So that'd be another way of doing it. I also wrote down here on my list here, sledgehammer work. See that in some CrossFit gyms? It's great, it's hard, it's heavy, right? So you have this, you know, like 10-pound or even 20-pound sledgehammer, and you're slamming it against like a big, usually like a big tractor tire. So you pick that sledgehammer up, you're bringing it up over your shoulder, you kind of bring your hands together as you come down, and then you slam it. But then you gotta pick it up, bring it over your shoulder again, and then slam it down. So again, you could do these exercises with a medicine ball, with a kettlebell. It doesn't have to be Viper specific or cable specific. You just have to think about like, how am I moving with this weight or external load? Okay, so again, that's the biggest area where people are kind of missing out, right? Another one that I'll show you here using the Viper is just doing like a side-to-side tilt. Now this tool is, you know, specifically for this, but you could use it with, you know, some other tools like a weighted barbell, you know, like the fixed barbells that are in the gyms. Honestly, you could even do it with like a, you know, like a heavier, you know, shovel or something like that at home, but just doing like these tilts, right? So as I move lateral, I'm coming down, but if you notice, my body's gonna twist as I bring this down to the side. And then I use my legs to help pull it up, and then I can twist and bring it down to this opposite side and then back again. So just by doing some of these exercises, I'm moving my body in three planes of motion. One complaint I get a lot is when people say that they throw their back out right after the first snow in winter. And I look at them, I'm like, have you guys been practicing any three-dimensional loaded movement patterns prior to that first snowfall and having to shovel? They're like, well, no, what's that? And I say, well, how did you hurt your back? And they say, well, what I was doing, Nate, is actually I was lifting up this heavy, you know, shovel full of snow and trying to like throw it over here. Well, how could you mimic that? Well, here with the Viper, you can grab it like this, right? But you could do this with a weighted barbell, like in the gym also, if you don't have one of these available, and you practice this motion to there. And you pick it up, bending your knees, and you swing it back, okay? And then you do the same thing on the opposite side. You're here, and then you're pulling it back. What else could look like that in the gym? Is you could have a low cable down here, right? So the pulley is down there, you have a single handle, and you start here, and you kind of pull up and twist across, okay? So that's just another example of a three-dimensional loaded movement pattern. And I bet you, man, if you start practicing kind of this motion, down and across with a little bit of load, you could also use just a simple medicine ball like this, right? Where you're just kind of coming down like this and across. Those three-dimensional loaded movement patterns will really help develop those core muscles and kind of tie everything together so you don't injure your back when you're doing that first, you know, snow shovel of the year, okay? All right, so the last category we haven't really talked about yet is this linear unloaded, you know, quadrant right down here, okay? So in here I have MAT, I have physical therapy, PT, right? I have isometrics, and I have yoga, okay? So there's just a few, there's many more, but what is MAT? That it stands for muscle activation techniques. And in MAT, for corrective exercises, we use a lot of isometrics to help correct muscle imbalances. So one thing to look at is if you notice that, oh man, when I do a side bend, ooh, that hurts my back. Well, if that hurts your back on one side, it means that something on the opposite side may not be working correctly to allow you to shorten your muscles into that position. So an opposing muscle then tightens up to prevent you from moving into this one, meaning that these muscles aren't working. So this over here gets tight to say, I don't want to go this way, I'm going to pull you back into a safer range of motion. Okay? So that's just one example. But doing an isometric just means that you're flexing the muscle without moving the joint. So the most basic isometric that people can think of is with your arm and your bicep, right? So if I bring my arm up here to a 90-degree angle and I put my other hand here as resistance and I try to pull this one up, I'm flexing my bicep right now, but I'm not actually moving the joint. So that is a very safe way to exercise or activate the muscle without necessarily doing any damage to the joints. Same thing for that side bend. If I notice that, oh, it hurts when I go this way. Well, are you feeling muscles active or are you just feeling a tight muscle? If you're just feeling that tight muscle, you need to find a way to flex the correct muscles. So doing a side bend like this, right, into a door jamb. So if I was standing in a door jamb, imagine me here, right, and I just kind of lean my left shoulder into the door jamb, but I can feel these muscles flexing similar to the flex that I was feeling here on my bicep. That means that now I'm activating these with MAT. Okay, so again, this falls into that, realm of doing MAT or physical therapy or some isometrics. It's where you're holding something and your goal with this is that you're trying to stabilize those joints. Okay, so if you feel real unstable, like you tip this way and you're like, oh, my back, I feel real wobbly here. You need to find a way to stabilize that position or mobility. And this is the same rule for everything. It could be your knee joint, your hip joint, your neck, your shoulder, your elbow. Okay? When we're working with muscles, you want the muscles to feel worked. You don't want the joints to feel worked. Okay? The muscles go in between the joints. Okay? So when I flex my elbow like this, I want to feel this bicep shortening when I curl it up, and I want to feel this muscle lengthening as it goes down. I shouldn't feel my elbow joint. I shouldn't feel my shoulder joint. Okay? Same thing with some shoulder moves. If I do a lateral raise, the big muscle for that is right here, the delt. It's just below the shoulder joint, but it pulls that arm up and then it lengthens it down. Okay? So again, doing these light isometrics, okay, whether it's for your biceps here or putting your hands together and trying to squeeze these chest muscles, it basically creates that synergy to where the muscles can work without impacting the joints, whether it's the neck, the shoulders, the mid-back, the lower back joint, right? The knee joints, the ankle joints. The muscles are supposed to move those bones and the joints shouldn't be taking on that stress or strain, okay? So that's one area. Again, physical therapists are terrific at this, chiropractors are great at this, a lot of exercise physiologists, personal trainers are great at identifying where those imbalances are, but you as a person need to figure that out. One easy way to do it, and you see me as I wrote that down on here, yoga, okay? Not all yoga, again, I want to clarify, but a lot of yoga is moving your body into an isometric position and then holding it there, okay? Now some of it, of course, is like the flow and you're doing, different, paces and stuff. I'm not saying all yoga is that way, but with a lot of yoga, just like this warrior pose, right? Where you're just kind of like going forward like this and you're trying to hold your arms up like this. That is a lot of different shoulder muscles. You're being able to use some of your hip muscles as you lunge forward, right? And you're bringing your arms up and holding those different positions, whether it's here or whether you're holding, some of the other ones like the tree pose, like this, right? You're holding these different isometrics in these positions. And I'm not a yoga instructor, so those probably looked horrible. But what the purpose is of that is to try to get those muscles to be available so that when you do add load to it, it doesn't throw your back out or impinge your shoulder or tweak your knee or your back or your ankle or something. Okay, so just holding isometrics. Another simple one would be a plank, right? Where you go on your forearms like this, you're trying to feel those stomach muscles engage. Another easy isometric would be a wall sit. Okay, where you put back against the wall, you have your knees at 90 degrees, and you're just holding that. And again, all you're doing is you're trying to flex those muscles without impacting the joint. Okay, so again, those are some quick examples. I know I went through it pretty fast, but again, this is just that 4-quadrant, pattern. So again, we kind of look at all of those, and here again is the 3 dimensions and the linear, position. So this is that, kind of Y, portion of the graph, okay? And then the X portion is the unloaded movement patterns on this side or this half of the graph, right? And then here's the loaded movement patterns on the right side. So again, we have these 4 quadrants, and again, 3-dimensional loaded are things like Viper, right? Things like using a sledgehammer, okay? Or an axe, right? Or doing functional movements with weight. We talked about the cable stuff, okay? If we move down here into the loaded linear, this is like your traditional weightlifting, right? Your bench pressing, your squats, your shrugs, your shoulder presses, you know, your bicep curls, your lat pull downs. They're moving weights in one dimension or one direction, okay? And those are great. All 4 of these are great, okay? And then you can use TRX, fill in the blank, kettlebell. You could use, you know, whatever load you want for that, but it's moving in one direction only. Okay, if we move down here to the bottom left, again, this is unloaded linear, things like MAT, physical therapy, using some bands, doing isometrics, right? Doing some yoga. Those are those areas where you're moving in one plane of motion. You're not twisting and turning, but you're trying to isolate, you're trying to flex like one series or one specific section of muscles, okay? And the last one, this 3-dimensional unloaded, okay? This is, again, doing some jogging. If you can't jog, you know, try doing some ellipticals that have the arm motion where you're moving your arms back and forth, right? But also, any sport really has 3-dimensional movement patterns, whether it's basketball, right? Racquetball, tennis, throwing the frisbee to your kids, okay? Any of those kind of fall in that area. One other one, lastly, that I'll go through that's a really easy way to get 3-dimensional unloaded movement is basically just doing a sprint motion without moving your legs. Okay, so just by doing this, you are twisting your body in 3 planes of motion, okay? But you can also do that and it can look like this, but now I'm not moving my spine. So we don't want to do that part. It's just twist and turn. So basically this is a way to run or to sprint without impacting your lower body. Okay, but just doing some of these as a warm-up can really, really help out. So overall, kind of going through these 4 quadrants, you can do and spend like a few weeks in each quadrant for your own workout, okay? But typically what I try to do is normally for my workouts, I try to warm up in this category right up here, okay? So I do some form of 3-dimensional unloaded movement pattern for my workout warm-up. I either shoot some hoops, right? I go for a jog and really try to kind of trunk twist my body, or I at least do lunges in 3 different positions. I lunge forward, I lunge backward, I lunge to the side, I do a turning lunge, right? So again, body weight stuff right up in here, okay? And then after that, I start going through this next category. So then I start moving with the Viper. I start doing some 3-dimensional stuff with a medicine ball, right? With a little bit of weight or load. Okay, I start doing some wood chops, okay? That's my next segment of my workout. And then down here, I go into my normal workout, right? The kind of traditional stuff. All right, I do my bench press, I do my squats, right? I do my heavier weight stuff, okay? And then where do I cool down typically? Right over here. I do my isometrics. Maybe I do a few yoga poses at the end. I do some of my MAT, very specific things, you know, looking at ranges of motion where I know that I'm a little bit weak. So again, trying to incorporate all 4 of these quadrants into your workouts will really, really help to balance those things out. And if you notice that, man, I'm only doing 1 of those quadrants or 2, you know what, give me a call, give me a shout. We'll figure out a way to try and, you know, set that up so that you balance that out. And I guarantee if you're doing all 4 of those quadrants in there, your body's gonna feel a lot better. You'll feel a lot less injuries. You'll start feeling a lot more balanced in your movement patterns. Where you're not like, oh man, every time I do this curl, man, I get it right in my elbow, okay? You'll be able to open up and start doing more and more activities.